but grooving, hanging out, looking for something to happen while the day world lay hanging. Night people start swinging, hanging out.
Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. We will begin our event very shortly this morning. So we'll invite everyone to come inside the Nusantara Ballroom and take your seat and be prepared as we'll begin the event in a few minutes. Thank you very much.
Happen. Night people hanging out, looking at each other, waiting for something to happen. Night people.
Hello everyone, a very good morning to all of you. Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. Yes, selamat pagi semua Bapak Ibu yang terhormat, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to the 47th IPA here in Ph.d. My name is Rahma Alia and it is a great honor for me to be the host for today's sessions. Now, today we have a series of plenary sessions, also group discussions, so we'll start our very first session shortly. And just a little bit of a background on what we're having as a first session this morning. It is our first plenary session titled The Industry Challenge, ladies and gentlemen. Now, panelists in the session will be discussing identified issues and proposed action plans based on the white paper as developed by the IPA board and Mackenzie to attract capital for Indonesia oil and gas investment to secure energy transition. We hope that this session will enrich our knowledge and thoughts, also finding common collaborative solutions, as this must be done together for a better oil and gas investment climate here in Indonesia. And for your background, for what we're going to be discussing today, we will showcase the video for Industry Challenge, attracting capital for Indonesia oil and gas investment to secure energy transition. Here it is.
Attracting capital for Indonesia oil and gas investment to secure energy transition. Pertumbuhan ekonomi Indonesia membutuhkan pasokan migas yang mencukupi. Guna memenuhinya, dibutuhkan kapital yang besar untuk melakukan eksplorasi, pengembangan lapangan, dan produksi migas. Pemerintah Indonesia telah menargetkan produksi minyak 1 juta barrel per hari dan produksi gas 12 juta kaki kubik per hari. Namun, upaya tersebut membutuhkan investasi yang besar, mencapai 20–26 miliar dolar Amerika Serikat per tahun. Di samping itu, seluruh aktivitas migas kini harus dibarengi dengan usaha penurunan emisi karbon. Mengingat besarnya kapital yang dibutuhkan untuk mencapai target produksi migas tersebut, maka diperlukan upaya untuk menarik investasi global. Atau dengan kata lain, dibutuhkan peningkatan daya saing Indonesia karena menarik minat investor tidaklah mudah. Mengutip data Mackenzie kuartal 1 2023, pada skala 0–5, indeks daya saing sektor hulu migas Indonesia di Asia Pasifik baru mencapai nilai sekitar 2,8. Sebagai contoh, perizinan dalam sektor migas di Indonesia masih terlalu bervariasi dan memakan waktu yang panjang. Hal ini terkait karena proses perizinan melibatkan banyak pihak, yaitu kementerian dan lembaga di pusat dan pemerintah daerah, serta lembaga terkait lainnya. Dalam hal perbaikan iklim investasi, dibutuhkan proses yang cepat dan terintegrasi untuk dapat menarik minat investor, terutama pada investasi gas bumi yang memiliki potensi besar dalam era transisi energi. IPA bersama Mackenzie dengan melibatkan para pemangku kepentingan, tahun ini menyusun dokumen kajian untuk mengidentifikasi hambatan dan menawarkan solusi guna menarik investasi migas ke Indonesia. Solusi-solusi yang diberikan pada kajian ini membutuhkan kerjasama semua pihak agar dapat mencapai target produksi migas untuk ketahanan energi dan mendukung transisi energi.
Yes, let's give a big round of applause for the video that actually tells us on the white paper. This is perhaps something different if we compare it to the IPA before this time. And it is prepared by the IPA together with Mackenzie as it lays the foundation on the roadmap of energy transition to make sure the energy security here in Indonesia. And now, ladies and gentlemen, before we begin and step deeper into the session itself, I would like to inform everyone that there will be a question and answer session at every end of every panel and group discussion. And you can always submit the question by scanning the QR code shown on the screen. If it's a little bit difficult for you, maybe you can come a little bit forward, and there's also somebody bringing the QR code closer to you so you can scan there and just drop your question through the QR code as you scan it. And to start this session, ladies and gentlemen, would like to hear the white paper presentation from Research Director, Upstream and Carbon Management, Mackenzie, Mr. Andrew Harwood. Let me just introduce a little bit more about Mr. Andrew Harwood. He is responsible for Mackenzie's corporate coverage in Asia Pacific. Andrew also contributes to Mackenzie's upstream research in Asia Pacific, working closely with the analyst teams in Delhi, Perth, and Singapore as well. And he's based in Singapore since 2010. Andrew specializes in providing insight on global upstream themes, corporate strategy for national and international oil companies, merger and acquisition trends, exploration performance, and fiscal benchmarking. And Andrew holds a BA Combined Studies degree in Management and Investment Finance with honors from Harwood University. So Mr. Andrew, without further ado, let's welcome him on the stage. Let's give a big round of applause. The stage is yours, sir.
Good morning, ladies and gentlemen, distinguished guests. It's a great pleasure of mine to be invited by IPA to present to you and to launch, essentially, the white paper that Mackenzie and the IPA have developed, targeting, looking to achieve energy resilience through the energy transition to safeguard Indonesia's economic growth and sustainable development. What I'll do this morning is we'll give you an overview of the first section of the white paper document, and then I'll invite some of our distinguished guests to the stage, and we'll hear from them in terms of their feedback and their response to the initial white paper launch. And then we'll take some questions from participants and from the audience. So hopefully that will give you a really good flavor of some of the work that Mackenzie and IPA have been doing together to really push forward the industry and support Indonesia's energy transition. So the purpose of the white paper is really threefold. What we've set out to do is to assess the increasing significance of environmental sustainability and its impact on Indonesia's energy security and affordability. We've tried to identify the key levers that can enable Indonesia to harness its unique and bountiful resources and capabilities to optimize that balance between affordability, security, and sustainability. And we've also tried to propose a framework with clear and actionable goals to develop and implement these levers with the goal of really fostering a resilient and sustainable energy system. Now, in terms of the methodology that we've worked through, we've engaged with a number of industry and government stakeholders to map out the key priorities, the key challenges, and the opportunities faced by Indonesia's E&P sector. Many of these key stakeholders are in the room today, so it's a great pleasure to be able to present back to them and share with them the findings that we have come up with. We've iterated on that mapping of priorities, and we've gone through a number of consultations with the key stakeholders to propose recommendations. And using Wood Mackenzie's sort of fact-based insights, in-depth analysis, we've developed that final set of key recommendations and timelines that we think can push Indonesia's E&P sector on and really support Indonesia's energy transition. Now, in terms of the structure, if you'll have seen the QR codes, you can download the report at your leisure and read through it. It's a lengthy document, there's a lot in there, but I think I would draw you to that executive summary that really lays out the key challenges that we have identified, that are common themes, that not necessarily new challenges that haven't been identified before, but I think through the process of laying out these challenges across multiple stakeholder groups and then providing these actionable recommendations, I think we've come up with a document that can really serve a really key purpose for Indonesia's upstream sector. What I'm going to touch upon today is point 4 there around growing domestic oil and gas production to address Indonesia's energy trilemma. Later on today, my colleague Joshua New will take you through what we believe are the key fundamentals for developing a domestic CCS, CCUS sector that again can support Indonesia's decarbonization ambitions. Now, I think everyone is familiar with what we mean by the energy transition, the need to decarbonize our energy systems and reduce GHG emissions in an effort to limit global warming to 1.5 degrees or less by 2050. This objective really calls for the fast deployment and scaling up of low-carbon solutions, which is going to require unprecedented levels of investment. And much of this investment is going to be in technologies that are not yet economically or even technologically feasible today. So there's going to be several different pathways to reach net zero by 2050, but we believe that there are some key fundamentals that will remain no matter which direction, which journey we embark upon. First of all, renewable energy is going to have a pivotal role in decarbonizing the power sector. Secondly, in the face of continued and sustained energy demand, gas is going to be the bridge fuel of the energy transition. And thirdly, we think CCS and CCUS is going to be a key tool of decarbonization, particularly for sectors that are hard to abate their emissions and still require hydrocarbons to support them. So those are the key fundamentals around the challenges we're facing as part of the energy transition. But there's a further set of challenges as well that really stem from some of the structural and socio-economic changes that are going to be required to decarbonize and reduce emissions. So for the energy transition to not only be successful, but also fair and just, countries are now having to look at strengthening their energy resilience to ensure that cutting emissions does not come at the expense of economic growth and human development. And I think that is a key part of Indonesia's energy transition as you look at the need for the country to continue to develop and expand economic growth throughout the archipelago. Now, given limited time, limited resources, and competing interests, so far, policymakers have looked to balance some of these trade-offs, and really they've prioritized certain areas in their national energy policies across 3 key categories. So we're looking at energy security, energy affordability, and environmental sustainability. The energy trilemma as we all understand it. In Indonesia, and this was something that became apparent during our discussions and our interviews of all of the key parties, policymakers have thus far prioritized security and affordability, focusing primarily on meeting rapidly growing energy requirements and economic development, urbanization, population growth. This is a political choice, but coupled with the vast hydrocarbon resources of Indonesia, it's resulted in an energy landscape that is characterized by really the predominance of fossil fuels, the perhaps limited to date deployment of renewable energies, and a real nascent low carbon solution sector. Now, as Indonesia progresses on its energy transition journey, we think 4 key macro level themes are going to really act as the cornerstones of the country's energy transition. Those cornerstones are, first of all, growth in total energy supply is going to be required to sustain economic growth in line with the vision of Indonesia 2045. We're going to continue to see that predominance of fossil fuels, especially for end uses or industries that do not have economically competitive alternatives. We will see a growth in renewable power generation to decarbonize the economy, but the pace of that renewables growth is up for debate. We saw some interesting projections yesterday around the level of renewable power that will be in place by 2060, and perhaps that's something that we can debate on the panel as to how realistic those projections are. And we'll also need the deployment of low carbon solutions, which today are limited by the economic and technological readiness, but also perhaps the supporting frameworks and the regulations that can incentivize that investment. Now, given the country's commitment to achieve net zero emissions by 2060, various decarbonization measures have been put in place, which arguably introduce uncertainty around the shape and the balance of Indonesia's future energy landscape. As Indonesia dives into the details of balancing the energy transition, several key questions we think remain unanswered. So first of all, how quickly will energy demand grow? The implication on power demand is particularly important here. How quick and effective will be the reduction or the planned reduction in coal power generation? The actual impact of regulatory exceptions, the financing of early coal retirements kind of remains unclear. How quickly can renewable power be scaled? I mentioned some of the projections that were presented yesterday. We would argue that wind and solar resources in Indonesia, battery storage technology, some of these things are not necessarily in place as they would be needed, and so it creates uncertainty over just how quickly renewables can scale. And then the last 2 questions: what is the value of Indonesia's domestic oil and gas production in achieving Indonesia's energy resilience? And what role should CCS, CCUS play in Indonesia's energy transition? The white paper actually focuses on these final 2 questions, providing actionable recommendations in a context where perhaps the first 3 questions are a bit more uncertain and are much more up for debate. So looking at the first of those 2 questions, which is the key part of today, we're focused really on what is the value of Indonesia's E&P sector in achieving energy resilience. Now, if we look at the Wood Mackenzie forecasts of oil and gas supply, which may perhaps be on the conservative side, but we like to think they're perhaps more realistic and achievable, we think that without a drastic revitalization, today's decrease in domestic oil and gas production in the face of growing domestic demand is going to aggravate the country's existing oil import dependency, and is going to turn Indonesia from a net exporter of gas to a net importer within the next decade. As a result, we think the value of the E&P sector, or the oil and gas sector, from a domestic production perspective is very, very clear. Increased domestic oil production as a fuel and as an industrial feedstock can improve Indonesia's balance of trade and payment. It can reduce crude import costs. Increased production can provide protection from price volatility and supply disruptions. And it can support greater in-country value capture from Indonesia's downstream refining capacity. And it can generate that multiplier effect, creating incremental value along the value chain. Increasing gas production as an industrial feedstock will have similar benefits as increased oil production, but will also will also protect industrial users, again, against price volatility and supply shortage. The development of domestic gas supply can also enable the downstreaming of the gas value chain into natural gas derivatives such as ammonia and methanol, and perhaps in the longer run can support other forms and integration with renewables as well to generate additional value and low carbon sources of energy. Gas as a fuel for power is also going to be key going forward, with new coal capacity for power constrained, but uncertainty around how quickly renewables can scale up. Gas is arguably going to be the fuel that can fill that gap to guarantee power security, to offer a baseload power solution, and to decarbonize Indonesia's sort of energy supply as it moves away from traditional dependence on coal and looks at lower emission sources of energy. The fourth element that we think is really supporting that value of increased production would be excess gas supply. Based on government estimates of demand and targets for supply, the 12 BCF a day target that has earlier been shown by 2030, there's going to be significant excess gas that we think could be exported if Indonesia can harness its upstream resources. Those exports would generate additional government revenue and support further economic growth within the country. So there's a clear rationale for increasing Indonesia's domestic oil and gas supply to meet rising demand. And it's widely recognized that Indonesia still holds considerable resource potential. But there's a disconnect between connecting the potential supply with that growing and clear demand. How do we connect that supply with the demand? Well, it's going to require investment, and it's going to require more investment. We need investment in exploration to prove up the resources. We need investment in development to bring those resources on stream. And then we need investment in the operations, the production, to maintain that production and to maximize it and optimize. Now, through our discussions and consultations, we've identified several common blockers to investment. And there were really the same themes that came up throughout our discussions. So a real sense that these are common themes across all stakeholders. It's not just one group with a particular gripe. These are things that everyone recognizes as challenges faced by Indonesia's upstream sector and its ability to attract investment. The first of those blockers, and I've just highlighted in a bit more detail here, is fiscal competitiveness. This is not a new challenge faced by Indonesia. And I think we've seen several positive improvements to the fiscal terms in Indonesia over the recent years. I think credit should be given to SKK Migas and ESDM for a lot of the incentives that have been made, particularly in the last 2 or 3 years, to attract new investment. However, in a world where all countries are competing harder for oil and gas investment, or are changing their terms to support and incentivize decarbonization in the long term, we argue that Indonesia needs ever more support for its fiscal changes. Arguably, it needs even more dramatic action. Recent improvements have primarily focused on new developments, on new block awards, rather than on existing projects that are already in production today. And there's a sense of a limited level of flexibility on what is a reasonable level of return for investors, commensurate with the risks that they take when spending millions, indeed billions of dollars on exploring, developing, and operating new resources. We think these limitations on Indonesia's fiscal regime are going to hinder or can hinder financial viability and Indonesia's attractiveness to international investors when they compare Indonesia with other opportunities within their global portfolios. The slide here just shows a cut of information from our Upstream Competitiveness Index. We've just looked at the countries in Asia Pacific, and you can see that although Indonesia, in a score perspective, it has actually increased over the last 2 or 3 years, everywhere else is increasing as well. Everywhere else is looking to get more attractive. And so to be ahead of the pack and to actually move further to the left, more dramatic changes are required. So that's just one of the fiscal areas that one of the blockers that we identified. If we run through some of the other key blockers that we highlight in terms of Indonesia's ability to attract investment, I mentioned fiscal competitiveness. Fiscal stability is another area that we think is a key area of potential challenge. We've seen over the years, and Wood Mackenzie has been party to some of these changes, sudden changes in policy without consultation of the industry. We've seen uncertainty in how those changes are going to impact projects or project economics. We've seen discretion involved in some of the fiscal terms that have been set in the past. And that uncertainty makes it hard for investors to plan long term, and it can erode investor confidence if there's a continuous back and forward of changes for the good or for the bad. The third area of challenge that I think, again, everyone in this room would recognize is the ease of doing business in Indonesia. Delays in project approvals, misalignment in some of the regulatory stakeholders, perhaps a lack of clear long-term vision for CCS initiatives and how they fit with the upstream sector. These can increase the complexity and the costs of not only developing upstream projects, but also developing decarbonization and CCS developments. I think the fourth area is net zero E&P investments. We've seen limited provisions or limited support for emission reductions for Scope 1 and 3 and offsets. And this lack of regulatory environment can impede investment from environmentally conscious investors with corporate sustainability goals. More and more, the big energy investors around the world are focusing on reducing their emission footprint to comply with their own home governments sort of regulations with their investors and with their key stakeholders. And therefore, for Indonesia to be able to attract those global investors, it needs to have the framework and the systems in place that will give those investors confidence that they can invest in low carbon developments in Indonesia. So to address these areas of improvement, Wood Mackenzie and the IPA are proposing 4 actionable recommendations. I think it's important that we don't just stand up here and provide some fancy words. We can provide clear, actionable recommendations that Indonesia can take away and incorporate into its longer-term plans. The chart on the left-hand side there just highlights, how we rank these recommendations in terms of the level of impact that they will have and the level of how realistic or achievable they are. If I just walk you through sort of where we see these, first of all, the development of a long-term energy roadmap is key. The long-term energy roadmap can be part and can build on the National Energy Council's existing plan to elaborate on the role and decarbonization expectations of domestic oil and gas. I think that long-term energy roadmap needs to clearly delimit and identify the roles of all stakeholders within Indonesia's upstream sector. What is expected from the industry? What is expected from the regulators? What is expected from the national energy champions? And what is expected from the government in terms of the support that it needs to provide? The second recommendation that we are making, and we perhaps see that as having a greater impact than the first, but perhaps it's harder to achieve. The establishment of an overarching legal framework. And again, this is something, you know, a new oil and gas law is something that's been in discussion for a number of years. But we think this is a fundamental piece of legislation that can provide greater regulatory stability, enhance regulatory transparency, and improve that ease of doing business that we've highlighted as a blocker to new investment. One of the main challenges is going to be the management of competing interests. And so extensive sort of cross-ministerial consultation and stakeholder alignment is going to be required to gain that consensus. And from our discussions that we've had, there is a will across various departments, various ministries to come together and put together and support that overarching legal framework. Thirdly, and I highlighted it on the previous slide, an enhanced and redesigned fiscal regime is going to be key. An enhanced fiscal regime could be designed in the space of just a few months and could constitute one of the main drivers of greater and quantifiable investment returns. And I think being able to promote and being able to promote and publicize these fiscal improvements to the wider global sector is going to be a key part of this as well. Again, the challenge is going to be stakeholder alignment, as the new regime will disrupt perhaps preconceived notions of what a fiscal regime can and cannot do, and also the level of sort of return perhaps that investors are expecting. The fourth recommendation that we're making is the introduction of a national greenhouse gas reduction framework. The principles and the methodologies of this framework should look to reference existing international best practices. The operationalization of a nationwide system and the alignment of many stakeholders is again going to be a challenge, but this is something that is really fundamental if Indonesia is to provide the clarity and the support for investment in decarbonization technologies, if it's to meet those emission reduction goals. This framework is going to provide the rules, the playbook for decarbonization, the rules around how economic value can be generated from that decarbonization, and it would send a very strong signal that Indonesia is supporting and enabling the move towards a decarbonized future. It's been fascinating over the last 12 months or so, actually, to see the competition between Indonesia and Malaysia, where we've seen the introduction of changes or new policies in one country often spurs the other country to get its act together as well. So it'd be great to hear later on from Pak Firouz on how Malaysia has gone about putting in place this kind of framework. Now, these recommendations, given the right government support, policy, and support from the industry, these, we think, could be implemented within a year. It perhaps sounds aggressive in Indonesia, but we think that Indonesia's upstream E&P outlook needs an aggressive approach. Now is the time, it needs to be done quickly. SKK Migas' recent update of Indonesia's upstream performance for the first half of the year indicates, unfortunately, that the country has never been further away from its 2030 production targets. And so if those targets are to be realistically achieved or approached, dramatic action needs to be taken, and it needs to be taken very, very quickly. As the energy transition takes hold over the longer term, influencing government policy, influencing investor strategies, and increasing public scrutiny on the E&P sector, the window to turn around the oil and gas sector in Indonesia may be closing. So to reiterate, it's urgent for the government to act now to ensure the energy resilience and transition readiness of Indonesia. The key next steps for us would be to design that long-term energy roadmap by building on the National Energy Council's existing work, ensuring that it clearly delineates the roles of domestic oil and gas and CCS in Indonesia's future energy landscape. Engaging with industry and stakeholders to finalize the key building blocks of a new legal framework for the E&P sector that can not only facilitate permitting and licensing processes for E&P activities, but can also ensure compatibility with CCS development plans. And identifying and designing an enhanced regime of fiscal terms that are fit for purpose. So customized incentives based on field-specific attributes that can draw from lessons learned from previous domestic developments and can benchmark Indonesia against other countries with comparable challenges and asset characteristics. So that concludes my presentation. I would now like to invite my distinguished panelists to the stage. We have members from the Ministry of Finance, from SKK Migas, from the National Energy Council. Well, we do not have anyone from the Ministry of Finance yet. From the Malaysia Petroleum Management Authority, and also from IPA. So it's going to give me great pleasure to introduce everyone to the stage. So first of all, if I could have Kurnia Chairi. Kurnia Chairi is the Deputy of Finance and Commercial at SKK Migas. He's responsible for the financial and commercial aspects of the oil and gas industry in Indonesia. He's over 20 years of experience, including the oil and gas sector, and has held various positions in both the private and public sectors. Welcome to the stage. Next up, I'd like to invite Dr. Satya Widya Yudha. Pak Satya is a member of the National Energy Council of the Republic of Indonesia for 2020 to 2025. He was appointed by the President of the Republic of Indonesia with the approval of the Indonesian Parliament. Pak Satya, previously a Member of Parliament, served as Vice Chairman of Commission 1 in the House of Representatives of the Republic of Indonesia, overseeing defence, foreign affairs, communication and intelligence. And before then, as Vice Chairman of Commission 7, which oversees energy and mineral resources, the environment and forestry, higher education and research and technology in Indonesia. Please welcome to the stage, Dr. Satya. Next up, if I could welcome Mr. Mohamed Firouz Asnan. Pak Firouz is currently the Senior Vice President of Malaysia's Petroleum Management Authority, the upstream business of PETRONAS. He was appointed to the role in June 2019, and Firouz is a registered professional engineer and a member of the Institution of Engineers, Malaysia. Please join us. And lastly, but definitely not least, I'd like to welcome Greg Holman from the IPA board. Greg has been working in the upstream energy sector for the past 20 years across a range of commercial, technical and operational roles, having originally graduated as a civil engineer from the University of Adelaide, beautiful part of the world. Greg has also worked in a number of countries, including Australia, Indonesia, Malaysia and the UK, and he's currently director for Repsol's Indonesia business unit and Repsol's representative on the IPA board. Thanks, everyone. Okay, I'm going to jump over here. Okay, now we've got everyone on stage, and hopefully I have kind of set the scene for this session. I'd like to give the panelists a couple of minutes to share their initial response to the IPA and Wood Mackenzie white paper. So if we could perhaps start off with SKK Migas and Pak Kurnia, would you like to give some remarks on your view on the white paper? Do you want to do there or do you want to do there? Up to you.
Thank you, Andrew. Honorable guests, ladies and gentlemen, Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. Good morning, all. First of all, I would like to congratulate to IPA for successfully organizing this event. Hopefully, this event can create a stronger relationship and collaboration among every party related to oil and gas business in Indonesia. Thank you for your presentation, Andrew. I think I will give several insights about how the SKK Migas action plan in enhancing regulatory stability, responding a part of your finding also. Maybe I could go to several slides in this occasion. In the first slide, I will explain that more or less the same, similar with Andrew finding that we have also priority in security and affordability in energy trilemma. But in my opinion, this phenomena not only occur in Indonesia, Andrew, because I heard that government across Asia now currently also formulating strategies in terms of natural gas reserve policies, building new terminal and storage tank as a buffer against supply disruption. So it is a common issue in Asia maybe. And also as an effort to force the investment, we could see that in Indonesia, the trend of investment in oil and gas in semester 1 in 2023 increased by 21%. So if we compare to the global investment with the rate of 9.5%, it shows the big opportunity in Indonesia. And the last one is gas as a transition of energy. I think I agree that we will see the increasing global gas demand, and also in Indonesia the same thing it happened. So SKK Migas with the contractor will try to unlock the gas potential, unlock the gas project using the advanced technology and with a great collaboration. Based on our projection in SKK Migas that 2020 and 30 is could be a peak of production in gas supply in Indonesia. So I hope it could answer the need of the more cleaner energy, especially we could consider gas as a cleaner energy compared to oil and coal. So I hope it will answer the need of the additional energy. Next. Okay, thank you. Yeah, we also conduct certain what we call result based on the survey in ICIOG 2022. There is insight from the respondent that we have at least 5 areas that become a challenge and expectation. And similar, one of that is how we can simplify regulation and permit. And we have issue also in energy transition, and the other is enhancing competitiveness globally and stability of Ph.d. Fiscal term. This kind of finding, maybe part of it confirm what Andrew mentioned before in the previous presentation. We also record the investment attractiveness in Indonesia based on the data we collected that since to 2015, actually there's a decreasing trend of investment attractiveness. However, since 2020 until now, the trend is going up. Now, in overall, the rating in June 2023 reached the level of 5.4, Uh, for the four component, maybe we could see that fiscal system overall rating is the lowest one. However, if we go into detail, that actually it's much improvement in there. Yeah, we can share with you the detail, because every year it improved very in a very good sign. Yeah. And even the legal and contractual issue is quite high. However, it is stagnant in several years. So we have to confirm that the revision of the law of Migas it become a very priority, because legal and contractual is stagnant over years. Yeah. So if we can revise it, maybe it will increase. Now, what SKK Migas trying to do is we have a transformation, yeah, based on previous challenge and also the progress of investment attractiveness. Now we have a clear vision to produce 1 million barrel oil per day and 12 billion scf per day gas in 2030. Before I was in finance also, and when in 2016 maybe I write the notes of government budget, and the tone is always negative, because we are trying to explain to the public that the lifting will decrease over time. But now, with the clear vision, yeah, we have a strategic plan to produce 1 million. We have something to achieve together with all of the contractor. And the second one is we want to provide SKK Migas as a center of excellence with intensive training and develop certain initiative, including cross-posting human resource, again, collaborating with the contractor. And the third one, quite similar also with Andrew finding that we want to answer the long-lasting of the license process. Yeah. SKK will be at the forefront guarding the issuance of license to speed up the process. So please do not hesitate to contact us and coordinate with SKK Migas, because we want to be one-door service policy. It become implementable in our objective. The number 4 is commercialization. It has become a big issue also. Maybe we have a discussion in later. We are also aware that we have to establish a transparent and fair pricing mechanism. So we have to make sure that upstream get the economic value with the level fair, and also the downstream get the benefit from the commercialization of the oil and especially the gas. And the last one is digitalization. It is also a key factor that SKK Migas trying to improve.
Kurnia, I think maybe we can expand more on the rest of your presentation through the discussion. And
the last one maybe I will to share with you, because now more than 50% of the exploration well discovery is mostly gas, and then 70% of the plan of the P.O.D. also gas. So we want to make sure that we can utilize and develop it with the efficient manner. That's why we have a policy to fulfill or utilize gas for domestic demand. Our law say it should be 25%. However, the number now increased 65% for domestic needs. So it is no problem anymore, I think, because the gas now is the demand in domestic is very high. I hope it's not become an issue. So we can guarantee the demand is already here. So that is my presentation, Andrew. We hope that we can collaborate and also we can answer all the what are the issue in the oil and gas sector. With the good collaboration, we can achieve 1 million barrel oil per day and 12 billion scf per day gas in 2030. Thank you. Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh.
Thanks back, Kurnia. Ran a little bit over time there, but hey, it's Indonesia, right? So, Satya, would you like to go next and give us your response? Sure.
Thank you, Andrew, for giving me time. But I'd like to, okay, great. I'd like to share with all of you with regard to what we are currently doing. Sorry. Let's go back to the regulations that we are having at the moment. As you probably know, it's a lot of the regulation that's been imposed in Indonesia in order to support the energy trilemma, just been mentioned by Andrew a couple of minutes ago. So we do have the energy law, we do have the climate change law, we do have the presidential decree on the carbon pricing, and we have a carbon tax, and also we have the proposal of the new and renewable law. Yeah. So from those laws, I think government of Indonesia is trying to provide with the right ecosystem in order to develop the sustainability issues in Indonesia. This is part of the energy trilemma. The question is, are those laws are implemented, or are those laws still being discussed, or are those laws being pending at the moment? Because of the carbon tax definitely has not been implemented. It has been issued since July 2022. We're supposed to implement it. On the carbon pricing has not been effectively implemented. So I took all the feedback from IPA white papers regarding the uncertainty on the regulation aspect. But again, we are coming here to collaborate, between the policymakers, the players, as well as with the academia, who can provide what the best solution for us to achieve the net zero emission by 2060. So this slide, the next slide, this basically what I can mention here, that the National Energy Council is very much in line with the IPA white paper. If you look at the way we manage our the energy transition scenario, we don't get rid of fossil, for sure. So, but we like to see the fossil with the clean technology. So when Andrew mentioned about the CCS and CCUS, part of the strategy for cleaning of fossil, that's already in line with our strategy here. The second box, of course, we like to accelerate the new and renewable energy. But bear in mind, if we like to replace all the installed capacity of the fossil fuel at the moment with renewables, it's quite impossible. Because a lot of things has to be worked out in terms of the stability, in terms of the intermittency, in terms of the price, etc. So what we do is, we are moving to the energy that which is more sustainable, but slowly until renewables really can pick up with all the capacity that we do have here, which mostly dominated by fossil. And the third box, if you look at in the middle, is promoting the energy conservation. This is the very much important component, that energy efficiency has to be done parallelly while we are doing on the cleaner of the energy fossil and accelerating the new and renewable energy. And all in all, basically, we like to give a certainty on the energy security, and also the sustainability development, low carbon development, and energy independence, if we are able to do so in the futures. The next slide, I'd like to share with all of you here about the power capacity. You may compare with what been presented by the Ministry of Energy from Director of the various renewable energy yesterday afternoon when I was moderating the session. On her slide, is saying that there will be no power generations by gas, on 2055 up to 2060. In our calculations, because National Energy Council, at the moment, we are in the middle of revising the national energy policy. So we put here, sorry, we have to go back to the power. Yeah. If we put here, if you look at 2060, with high scenario, which is high scenarios, it means that the economy grows around 5.9%, and low scenario with the economy growth of 5.2%. So gas still play important role here. The gas with the CCS are projected to be around 44 until 49 gigawatt. But again, this morning, I think what Andrew mentioned about Indonesia projection on gas production, where we are going to be the net importer gas by 2038 or 2040, if I'm not mistaken. If ASEAN yesterday mentioned that ASEAN country as a whole, if you look at the, the projection is they're going to be net gas importer by 2025 if we are not doing anything. If there is no exploration, there is no, process to get more reserve on gas. So we have to face with the situation where we have to import gas. So if this is the case, so in 2060, if I put the number here, 44 up to 49 gigawatt of power plant fueled by gas, it's going to be coming from import gas. Yeah. But if you look at the other renewable energy that we are developing here, the mostly dominated by the solar. Solar's portion is quite high. So the next slide, giving illustrations about the final energy demand. If you look at the electricity, is quite dominant. Yeah, the electricity here, this is the color, the brown, the brown color, not the brown color. I mean almost yellow to brown. Yeah, that is from 261 million ton oil equivalent up to 453 million ton oil equivalent. So this is electricity. It means what? It means that most of the transportation sector going to be electrified, the industry going to electrify, and also another activities probably mostly dominated by the electrifications. So the power generations, like Andrew mentioned, is quite key role, for our future energy strategy and also at the energy demand. So that's given an idea for the audience here that we have to be more focused on the power sectors and also the energy mix. And the next slide, the next slide is showing that the energy mix in 2060, so almost 66.8% are renewables, but the gas and also oil still appear on the 2060. With the low scenario, it's around 66.3%. So from all those, my presentation, it shows that we are taking care of the strategy to be net zero emission by 2060. I think with the hard work that's been done by the IPA, with the IPA white paper, I do believe that we could comply, we could answer as long as we develop the collaborations between the industry, the policymakers, as well as with the other stakeholders. By saying that, I conclude my presentation. I would like to continue discuss later on. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Pak Satya. And yeah, it'd be great to dive into more detail on how those projections are being developed. Next up, I'd like to ask Pak Firouz to make some statements on his response to the Wood Mackenzie and IPA white paper.
Thank you, Andrew. always great to be back in Jakarta. I think I fully, I can fully relate to what Pak Satya and also what Pak Kurnia is saying about the outlook. I think these are interesting times for us. Demand is growing, and yet, future looks uncertain. So as industry, we both, Malaysia and Indonesia, are in the same boat, really. We need oil and gas. The country needs oil and gas to power the economy. But for us, we need to change our game. We need to decarbonize. At the same time, we need to also create an investment or an environment where investment can thrive. Investment is like oxygen. And for us, being in a resource industry, every day we go by, we have less of it, right? And when we can't change what's in the ground, but what we can change is our understanding of the potential. And this is where, in the case of Malaysia, as the host authority, although we are the regulator, but really it's no fun, Andrew, to be the regulator. We prefer to be a shaper. I think the industry is waiting for us to shape it in a way where we can grow the potential. And borrowing the term, the theme from today's conference, to be resilient. And to be resilient, we need to be competitive. But we prefer in Malaysia to see how we can get to our full potential. We don't have that many acreage, but what we try to do is to maximize the value of every single molecule. Yeah, every single molecule is valuable. It's time bound. If we monetize it too late, we lose the game. So this is where, for us, in defining our role or redefining our role. Beyond being a regulator, we want to shape, we want to enable. Money is tight. Even though oil price is good, money going into exploration is scarce. So we realize that. So where we think we can help is to project our narratives that, guys, there's a lot more potential, and here's more data. So the last few years, we put all our data on the cloud, so people can see what we see as the host authority, and maybe tell us also what we don't see. And where it is we don't have enough data, we help organize multi-client, so that when we have more data, we have better insights. When we have better insights, we have better, rate of success, because we need to incentivize exploration. So that's the first step, yeah. And then because without exploration, we would have a very short life, and with the resource of 2C that we have, we need to quickly also progress it to the 2P. Okay, this is where we also, when we look at our acreages, we look at it area by area. How do we unlock synergies between the different operators? So very recently, we have FID'd what we call our sour gas corridor. So some of these fields have been discovered a while back, high H2S, high CO2. But by grouping a few fields together, by sharing common facility, we are now able to develop those fields. So we need those gas, because our customers are waiting for it, not just in Malaysia, but around the region. And to back it up, we also offer the right terms, yeah? So, and this is where, as host authority, sometimes, Andrew, we take less, yeah? Because we need to grow the pie. And because if the pie don't grow, I think we have, again, a short life. And finally, besides better terms, better data, what we try to create in Malaysia is better customer experience. it's so difficult to bring in new players. We have been able to bring new players, but with the players that we have, we love our investors, because without them, we are nothing, really. So with the ones that we have, we want to create better experience. Through feedback from our investor, we are also looking at our processes and guidelines. You know, our guidelines used to be very thick, but now we say, hey, do we really need those? Do we need to be so prescriptive? So can we just specify the minimum requirements and then empower the operators to do the rest? So we're doing that now. It's a journey. We continue to take feedback, but we feel it's important that our investors stay with us. So we have got the likes of Shell, been long with us for 100 and over years. They picked up new blocks. They continue to grow, and we want to replicate that with all the others. So really, there's no magic here. It's about looking at ourselves, taking feedback, because you know, with feedback, we can go back and see how can we improve. And with the improvement, I think we have a much better future and do for all of us.
Yeah, thank you, Firouz. I think your comment there about MPM being a shaper and a coordinator rather than just purely a regulator, I think that's my sort of key takeaway there, and it's perhaps an important thing for Indonesia to consider going forward. Finally, Greg, I'd like to ask you if you could perhaps provide a response to the IPA and Wood Mackenzie white paper in your capacity as a member of the IPA board.
Sure. This is thank you. Okay.
And you only have 5 minutes.
Sorry, Andrew, I forgot to stand and to go there.
Selamat pagi, salam sejahtera untuk kita semua. I don't need 5 minutes. I suspect my key thing for this morning is with my first slide, which is to say thank you for all of you that contributed to creating the white paper. You know, it was wonderful when our president, Pak Yuzaini, presented it to the minister yesterday in the ceremony. That took about 30 seconds. The preparation of it took many, many months. I hate to think how many man-hours in your organization, because I think across the IPA member companies, you know, it was a really exhaustive effort. So thank you. We get a chance to, you know, as the board representation of the IPA, I get to say that publicly. I know we've said it privately. We have you, Andrew, today. We also have Pak Joshua later on in the afternoon. So, you know, please extend your appreciation when you meet anyone from Wood Mac and the member companies. And of course, it wasn't just you know, Wood Mac and the IPA companies in isolation. I think the great success of the process was in having, you know, many focus group discussions. And if you saw the introduction video for the paper being handed over yesterday, you know, I saw so many friends from SKK and Migas, you know, Pak Satya, you were in the video. You know, when you contribute to creating something, obviously, you're more likely to listen to the recommendations, and if not, well, at least you're aware that it exists. So it's a tremendous advantage to be able to speak the same language and have something that's so detailed as a publicly available frame of reference. It's just so valuable, and it's not hidden behind a Wood Mac firewall or something. So thank you for that, for all that contributed. In response to it, you know, it will come as no surprise, and in fact, I'll skip ahead. The white paper itself is very thick. It's full of charts and facts and figures. And somewhere around page 38, you'll find, if you skip the executive summary, the recommendations on making Indonesia more attractive for investment. They've been spoken to already. You know, Pak Satya talked about the recommendation around, you know, having one roadmap. We talked about the incentives for individual projects. some of these things Indonesia does very well. Certainly when it comes to incentives for individual projects where you already have a project, I think that's somewhere where SKK, Migas do a wonderful job. I guess the only overlay I would have from a board perspective is, Indonesia is competing for not just the projects we have, but the projects we haven't found yet. The exploration, the bringing in investment, and it's not really winning yet. And we would like to see Indonesia compete very hard. I think there's a lot of incrementalism in the approach that we have in improving fiscal terms from Migas and ESDM, and they have improved. They are much better. They are getting better, but it's incremental. A radical approach of, let's go and make the fiscal terms look like New Zealand, where they don't really have very much oil and gas, but people still go and look for it. And then if that works and we make it a little too attractive, well, you can always dial it down in the future, in the round that comes afterward. But some real aggression in a fiscal sense to attract investment would be very well received, and I think it's a great way of bringing people in. I was also encouraged by, and I haven't heard this before, perhaps it is in use in Indonesia, but the idea of the customer experience as, the energy investor is the customer. I quite like that approach, and that, fiscal aggression combined with a real welcomeness would be great. So that is my response. Thank you again for all who contributed to the white paper, and I will...
Thanks so much, Greg. Thanks for your kind words. Thank you. I think now we want to spend a few more minutes sort of diving in, a little bit more discussion of some of the key points that have been raised in the paper, but also some of the key themes that some of the panelists have been talking about. I think I want to start with Kurnia, if I may. We've talked a lot about the improvements that have been made and the changes to the fiscal terms, the streamlining of processes. Can you perhaps give us a glimpse into the future of, maybe some of the future areas that SKK wants to focus on? And also maybe, what sort of support does SKK Migas need from its other stakeholders, from some of the other ministries that it interacts with? What sort of help does SKK Migas need to be able to sort of make some of those future improvements?
Yeah, thank you, Andrew. I think SKK Migas will continue to transform, and then one of the focus area is how SKK could be a best catalyst to speed up the process, to make everything clear regarding the every pace of the production in oil and gas upstream sector. And also, how could SKK Migas play an important role to facilitate and coordination across line ministry, especially maybe related to our stakeholder ministries of finance, ministry of energy and mineral resources, and also the others like Ministry of Fisheries, environmental, etc. So, Andrew, I think we realize that our vision will not be implemented if we don't have a good collaboration with all of the stakeholders. We try to learn how was the vision of the other ministry. We have to discuss more, as Pak Satya said. If I said that in terms of the perspective, let's say Ministry of Finance, maybe in terms of revenue, right now, we could see that in the last year, for the first time, maybe the revenue from the oil and gas is even the oil price higher, but the other commodity also get the benefit. So if we can observe that the non-tax revenue from coal royalty, higher than the revenue from oil and gas. So it is, we have to observe that maybe in the perspective of revenue, it should not enough argument again. Yeah. So maybe we could change or shift the idea. Is that related to the multiplier effect that oil and gas sector could improve in the area? Thank you, Andre.
Yeah, I think the Ministry of Finance is definitely going to be a key supporter going forward. So it's unfortunate that we couldn't have a representative from the Ministry of Finance here today. But I think also, as we've identified in the white paper, there is value in Indonesia's oil and gas sector beyond just the government revenue. You know, there's the additional spin-off benefits, there's the impact that it can have on the balance of trade and payments. So, you know, I think moving beyond just focusing, there's also, of course, the decarbonisation that certainly the gas sector can provide versus the coal sector. So I think trying to highlight the value of oil and gas beyond just pure sort of fiscal revenues is going to be a key thing going forward. Maybe if I can move to you, Satya, I think one of your slides there highlighted the multiple regulations and laws and things that govern the energy sector. And one of the things that we're advocating for is a revision of that sort of legal framework to provide more clarity, more transparency. You know, how close to something like a revision of the oil and gas law do you think we are? Is that something that we can achieve in the near term?
Well, I think you should address for the oil and gas law, not to me, but as to the member of parliaments. But again, you know, as far as I understand, they put it into priority, yeah, to be finalized soon. Yeah, and there is two laws that's now still hanging. You know, one is the new and renewable energy law. I mean, this is a draft of the law. It's been circulated. It's quite heavy discussions on several parts with regard to the power sectors. Hopefully, that if they are able to finish it soon, that's also one of the milestones. The second is the oil and gas law, of course. Yeah, if we do have these two laws and also the implementations of the carbon tax, which is now pending, and also the carbon pricing. So I do believe the ecosystem will be there, yeah, for the development of the sustainable energy or cleaner energy in the future. So I think, in my opinion, to be given a fair play to compete between fossil and renewables, those kind of law, it has to be in place. Without that, there is no appetite. People tend to be come back against to coal-fired plant, for instance. Yeah, but later on, if those laws are implemented, people will think that, you know, using the natural gas power plant that's much more cleaner and stable compared with coal. But now we cannot say that, you know, until all those laws in place and being implemented.
I guess, given the benefit that a revised oil and gas law could provide and contribute to the industry, you know, it could be a real legacy for future generations to come if that revision can be drafted and achieved in the near term. So we look forward to that. Yeah. Maybe moving on to Firouz. I'm really interested in, you know, what do you think have been, I think you touched on them and you highlighted them, but what do you think have been the real key changes in approach or changes in attitude maybe that have enabled MPM to be so successful in attracting investment? You know, we've seen some amazing results from recent bid rounds, international investors coming in. What do you think has changed that? I mean, as Wood Mackenzie, we have recognized a shift in attitude from MPM. We now have regular dialogue, regular consultation. How has that change come about?
Well, the change arises from the need to ensure continued investment. And this was a time when we were in the middle of COVID, and we asked ourselves, hey, how do we grow when the market is not growing? So then it dawns upon us that in order to change, we need to change ourselves first. We need to be more open. I mentioned earlier about sharing our data. So all our data, subsurface, surface, and all that is now on the cloud. So that's a huge shift for us. In the past, we were quite guarded. If you want to see our data, you have to apply, you have to write in, and you know. But now it's all on the web. It's subscription-based. You can pay for it using your credit card. Very small amount, just to pay for the system maintenance. So it started with that, and then we say, okay, we need to keep the ones that we have. This is where the customer experience, because it's, you know, the push for people to go and, you know, actually there's a lot in investment potential out there. You know, Malaysia is small, so people see our potential to be smaller, but still we have discoveries. You know, the last last year we featured in top 8 in terms of discoveries in the world. So that's not bad for a small country. But this is where we say we enable it through sharing of data. When it's not available, we organize multi-client data acquisition. Sometimes we pay for it ourselves, and we also change terms. During COVID, we introduced 3 new terms, and to date we have tweaked the PSC 11 times. 11. So it's not quite iPhone 14, but it's still 11 times since 1976. And so no silver bullet, but really working through the fundamentals, making sure the stability is there. When people sign PSC with us, they know what they're getting into, and they know what they will get throughout the PSC. And we also enable them. Today, we face rising costs. We also see resources being pulled away from this region, like rigs. I think some of you probably experiencing that. TNI barges. So what we try to do in Malaysia is to sequence our rig. So we have a long-term drilling sequence. So if you have 1 or 2 wells, join the sequence, so that then we can make sure that you have a rig. The same with barges. But we were talking also in the speakers room before. Perhaps maybe we, Malaysia, Indonesia, can also do the same. So that way we can keep more rigs in the region, or even not just jackup, but also drill ships, where there's just not many around this world. Otherwise, they go to the Middle East, where they offer 5-7 years contract. So there are still things that we can do together. I know the name of the game is competition, but I prefer not to see it that way. It's like golf. Actually, you're playing against yourself, right? And there's plenty of room to grow together, and we need to grow together. Otherwise, Andrew, all of us will not be here in future conference because we get wiped out, because there are other people who wants to take away our place as the preferred energy supplier, and we're just out of the game.
Yeah, I mean, that collaboration and cooperation between investors within Malaysia that you can coordinate, I think that's a really important part of it. Perhaps as you sort of hint at there, maybe there's cooperation that could be done between countries as well, in terms of supporting investment in the region as a whole, and you know, the collaboration and the cooperation that we saw yesterday as part of the PETRONAS and Pertamina signing on the Marcella PSC. Perhaps that could kickstart some of that sort of collaboration.
In just maybe 1 or 2 more points on collaboration. It's between the NOCs. There's one forum, we have the ESCOP, but there's also the IOGP. I see on the board IOGP, there's also a representative at head of strategy for IOGP here. So between the producers, so it's more like IPA, but at a global scale. I think there's a lot more we can share together. We compete for blocks, yes, but once we got the blocks, we can cooperate. We can share our standard, or maybe have a common standards. And we can share best practices so that we don't duplicate or replicate, and so we can get to the results faster, and we can all win together. I think that's the message I want to leave.
Yeah, thank you. Pat Greg, as the representative from IPA here, I mean, how welcome would some of the changes that have been made in Malaysia, for example, be for your members? How do you feel about the current level of, I guess, collaboration with some of the regulatory bodies or stakeholders?
Sure. I think, touching on the fiscal competitiveness first, I think anything that makes Indonesia rank highly is desirable. A lot of the fiscal systems come from many years ago when Indonesia was a member of OPEC. I mean, that sort of set the frame of reference as to how competitive do we need to be. Well, perhaps not super competitive when you're abundantly productive, but that has shifted. So that catch-up element, but I think some aggression in improving that. Pak Kurnia spoke about the ease of doing business, frequently a challenge in Indonesia, but I don't think that's the main barrier to getting new investors, to finding new people to come to Indonesia. I think they get as far as what do the fiscal frameworks look like, and they either like it or don't. It's only when you're in the country operating that you find some of these things that are a barrier to further investment. And we've only broadly spoken about it, but the reality is there's very much less exploration happening globally. So before, it was enough to compete in your region, to compete in Indonesia, to bring a little, there was still enough people interested in coming and exploring. But now there is radically less, absolutely order of magnitude less global exploration. So the level of competition you need to show to attract that is, unsurprisingly, you now need to be top of your class. It's not okay to come in the 50 percentile. You need to be top to attract any investment in new investors. Which is a mindset shift that hasn't happened. And anything that can change the mentality from a prevention of state loss, a lot of SKK's time is frequently spent on making sure procurement is correct, making sure the cost recovery amounts that go to the national credit are correct, but not so much on, what are we losing by doing a process that goes on, at great detail.
Yeah, thank you. I think, I think if we look, as the energy transition takes hold, after a year of, record commodity prices in the industry and the profits that the industry made last year, we have seen governments either looking to implement windfall taxes, which is forcing companies to look elsewhere around the globe, or the likes of the UK, or you have somewhere like New Zealand, where they've made a clear call that they want to transition away from oil and gas, and therefore they're not allowing new companies in. So there is, there's fewer places for companies to go and invest, but as we see the likes of BP, Shell, potentially repivot their businesses a little bit back to oil and gas, there is still a need to invest in new supply, and therefore the countries that do still have the resources and want to develop them, they need to, they're up against each other, and they need to compete harder to bring that in. We've got a few more minutes left, and then we'll move into taking some questions from the audience. But just a quick reminder that if you do want to ask any questions to the panelists, or you have any questions around the IPA white paper that you'd like to ask in this forum, please use the QR code on the screen there. But I guess anyone on the panel, do you have any sort of final comments that you'd like to make? Any last thoughts before we move into the Q&A section? If not, we can just go straight into the questions.
From a board perspective, let me give one last thing. I am enthused in the sessions and the panels, everything from the minister's opening remarks yesterday about the recognition that Indonesia is trying to change and respond to the energy transition, to very new things in a very dynamic way. I mean, let's not forget there are no countries that have sorted out the trilemma in any meaningfully perfect way. And it's fabulous that there's a pretty open discussion happening about it in the important public forums.
Can I add something here? Because of in my thinking about the how do we move forward? Yeah, we should be more engaged. Across the parties, across the stakeholders. Yeah, in order to really comply with the roadmap that we are developing. Ministry of Finance is one of key ministry, for everybody here, and of course it's part of the government. And the government in Indonesia is quite clear that endorsing the net zero emission by 2060, and we still recognizing that fossil fuels are important element, because we don't want to be trapped on the crisis like what happened in the UK and also in a couple years ago, and also in China. So we like to see here that fossil still important role as long as we do the carbonizations of the fossil. Okay, so by understanding the concept that fossil is still important, I do believe that all the sectors in the administration and the governments will comply with that. Because of National Energy Council consists of several ministries. We often convince each ministry to understand the concepts, to understand the roadmap that has to be consistent. And I think, here as IPA, as investors, we have to be more engaged, from time to time. Don't give up, you see, because of the collaboration is important for all of us. Even I use that platform at this forum for our input in revising the energy roadmap. Because we don't want that we develop the policy that cannot be implemented by the stakeholders. We like to see at futures that all the policy that we make are implementable. It got support from the industry. That's I think.
Yeah, I think that actually leads into the first question, which has been posed for you, Satya. It's around, we saw the roadmap presented on new and renewable energies or net zero emissions roadmap. You've also mentioned that the National Energy Council is updating its longer-term roadmap. The question that's come in is what roadmap actually should we be following? Which is the official position of the government? Which is that long-term consolidated roadmap that will dictate how Indonesia's energy future evolves?
Yeah, well, National Energy Council is mandated by the President to develop the roadmap. And now in the process of the revising national energy policy. Has not been finished yet. So all the data that I just presented to all of you is in the process of the revising the policy. So what happened with the presentation made by the Ministry of Energy from the Director of the Paris Renewables Energy yesterday is slightly different with us. It doesn't mean that it is the end of the world, you see, because of later on when the policy has been proposed by the President and got the endorsement from the top level of the leaders in Indonesia and become the presidential decree. And even for the national energy policy will be formed into the government regulations. Once that issue, every ministry it has to follow, and also the industry. So I mean, just wait for a while. Yeah, because we are in the middle of the developing that policy.
Don't take too long. The next question for Greg. What would be the top 3 things that would help accelerate the development of new gas sources in Indonesia?
Thank you. Three, okay. Gas price. You know, consistent, robust, supporting investment with a, I was going to say reasonable return for investors, but as you said in your opening remarks, you know, that means different things to different people. It's really poorly appreciated sometimes how much risk goes into, you know, the activities around finding resources in the first place, much less developing them. CCS, certainly for anyone that's international company, it's an absolute must because you simply won't get a license to invest in any development that's not making some sort of meaningful contribution towards achieving sustainable development goals. Repsol, for my own company, that's certainly the case. And probably procurement. If I had to pick on something, I'd say just making it easier to go ahead and do your front-end engineering design, to pick on something in the way that you would choose to. You know, typically, many companies would have tenders and feeds that they would do in collaboration with people across many countries. You know, they use the same way of doing it in Indonesia as they do in Mexico. The rules in Indonesia don't allow that. And they say you will do it the way we will do it, which is terrific if it's the best in the world. You know, I might challenge that assumption that it is. So there's three off the top of my head. So
yeah, I mean, there's some clear countries that are emerging as leaders in that CCUS field, and so there's some clear examples of best practice that can be picked from and implemented in this part of the world without.
And Indonesia is good on those, by the way. I mean, Indonesia has, you know, a somewhat regulated gas price, but it has very attractive gas pricing. We have the new CCS regulation. It is fit for purpose. It doesn't allow the hub concepts yet, but that's under progress. There are many parts in the world that are not as advanced as Indonesia on these key things. So they're the things that I think are important, but that's not to say they're not attractive in Indonesia in their own right. They actually are in many ways.
But they could be more, or more could be done. Yeah. Always more could be done. Yeah. Okay, the next question is for Pak Firouz around how is long-term energy planning developed in Malaysia, and how do you ensure that there's sort of minimal impact to those longer-term plans through whatever sort of short-term changes there may be in the political environment, just to make sure that there's consistency with those strategies?
Well, in Malaysia, the long-term energy planning is coordinated through our Ministry of Economy, with PETRONAS providing critical input. Because as a country, we would like to work with what we have. Oil and gas provides a big component to that. At the same time, we have the potential in renewables, solar, not so much wind. We have quite a bit of, hydroelectric. So we work with what we have. So combining all this resource that we are blessed with, we plan our long-term energy, profile or policy. And to support that policy, PETRONAS, I think we are quite blessed that we are fully empowered to do quite a number of things, from block awards or PSC awards. It's all within PETRONAS. From the bid round, my job is to take it to my board, and then we have a very supportive board, and with the board approval, we can award. With board approval, we can also extend PSCs. With board support, and also sometimes with management, depends on the threshold, we can also sign new UGF, upstream gas sales agreement. So we have full empowerment to do a number of things. Of course, there's the element of what they call it, political development. But as NOC, we serve the government of the day. And so far, the government has been very supportive in what we do because they see the value that we bring to the country, and they're very supportive. I must also say that we have a very supportive Ministry of Finance. It's difficult to convince tax people to collect less tax, but when we show them by giving some incentives. In fact, there are 5 areas where they're given incentive: infrastructure, deep water, EUR, high contaminants, and the like. We're able to show them that by taxing less some of these more challenging development areas, we can continue to grow the pie. So we are quite blessed by having a very supportive board and a very supportive ministries and agencies, and we continue to engage our stakeholders so that they support us in this quest. It's very challenging, but through active engagement, and we're able to get the support that we needed to grow the industry.
Yeah, so it's that long-term planning, long-term vision, the stability to stay the course, and of course, everybody wants to pay less tax, but if I have to pay more tax because my revenues have gone up, I'm okay with that. Maybe we've got time for 1 or 2 more questions. This one's coming in. Maybe I'll direct this towards you, Satya. I'd be interested in your take on it. I think you've been sort of highlighting some of this. You know, Indonesia is a net oil importer since 2004. Would it be better to jump straight to renewables rather than continue with oil and gas with CCS? You know, what might be the drawbacks of putting all of our eggs in the renewables basket immediately?
I may say that it is rather difficult, in several aspects. From the technological aspect, I think we have to admit, when we rely on solar, for instance, despite the intermittency, we have to rely on the battery storage. The price of the electricity using the battery storage is more than 10 cents per kilowatt hours, which is quite high. This is one of the examples. The second is the most stable renewable energy falls under the geothermals. And geothermal locations is pretty much dominated in the protected forests or in the forest, which is quite far from the markets. So the combination between geothermals and other renewable energy, we have to find a best solutions for the futures. And then the second, we have to understand as well, like what I mentioned earlier, our regulation, which is need to be in place, particularly to build the ecosystem, the green ecosystem, is to be done as quick as possible. Otherwise, it's difficult we compare between fossil and renewable where the regulation does not really support. So that's also a homework. And the third, we have to understand that the issue of the technology like a CCS, for instance, is not commercially viable yet. So in our slide, if you look at the map that I just presented, the CCS and CCUS could be commercially, we do expect it to be commercially by 2030. So we put the CCS technology for any kind of type of renewables, even for biomass, even for gas, of course, oil and gas as a fossil, of course, with the CCS, CCUS. But for the biomass, we have to have CCS, CCUS as well, because every product, is contained of the emissions. So we have to decrease the emission with CCS and CCUS. So the thing that we like to see, CCS, CCUS at the moment, is very much how to accelerate the oil production or gas productions, but not for the capturing the CO2 for non-oil and gas. The PLN and also other electricity company nowadays start to do some research, for the implementation of CCS, CCUS on the coal-fired plant, but it's not been really proven. So we like to see it later if it's commercially viable, if the technology permit it, and also any kind of that would make CCS technology competitive, then we can accelerate the implementation of the renewables. So the acceleration of the new and renewable energy, it depends on the technology itself. Because again, the affordability is become our key on the energy trilemma.
It kind of almost needs to be done hand in hand, the development of the renewable sector, but until renewables is in a position technologically or economically to take over, then you still need other sources of energy supply, and CCS can be a key part of decarbonizing our existing fossil fuel sources of supply until renewables catch up. So okay. The time has run out, unfortunately, for questions. I think we could have gone on for a bit longer, but we'd be more than happy to sort of continue the discussion past this session. I'd like to just sort of thank everybody on the panel who's contributed this morning. I think some of the key takeaways for me today are, again, some of those recommendations that we have made in our paper, but it feels to me that there is progress on developing that sort of coordinated long-term plan. Certainly, there has been improvements from a fiscal perspective, and hopefully there will be more to come. I think the role of the regulator and some of the government bodies as shapers and coordinators is key, and that idea of customer service or providing a good customer experience is something that I think we can all take away and look to implement in Indonesia. And I want to thank Greg as representative from the IPA for the support that they've given with Mackenzie in developing this white paper. So thank you very much. Just a reminder that we will be discussing and highlighting the second part of the white paper this afternoon, where we'll be looking at the key building blocks that are required to build Indonesia as a key destination of CCS, CCUS investment. So thank you very much to everybody again on the panel, and thanks very much to the audience. Give yourself a round of applause for attending tonight.
Right, thank you very much, Mr. Andrew, for leading. Go anywhere yet. Gentlemen, please stay on the stage, and also everyone, I'd like to inform that after this session, we will tie it in right away with a focus discussion 1. So please stay here. And for this opportunity, would like to say thank you to all of our speakers and presenter, and therefore would like to call to the stage Ms. Carol Gal and Mr. Gary Selby to deliver the memento to our speakers as well as presenter. Okay, there they are. Very insightful discussion indeed, especially regarding the white paper from IPA and Mackenzie on making sure the energy transition in Indonesia, and hot topic, CCS and CCUS were also discussed. Yes, memento number 1. Maybe 2 more, Mr. Gary. Now next to Satya, Yudha. Thank you very much for your insights as well on this occasion. And next, from Mr. Gary. Oh, okay. This girl. Yes. To Mr. Kurnia. And next, to Mr. Firouz from Mrs. Carol. Thank you very much. And finally to Mr. Greg. All right, and Ms. Carol, please stay here for the photo opportunity. Let's have a group photo, yes, together. Maybe you can hold the trophies a little bit up. All right, everyone. Are we ready for the photo session? Okay, hold your trophies up and give your best smile. 3, 2, 1. And maybe one more time. 3, 2, 1. Okay, thank you very much. All speakers and presenters, thank you for your enlightenment and also insights on this discussion. And once again, everyone, we will have a focused discussion one right after this, so we hope that you stay here for that. And once again, please give a big round of applause for our speakers and presenter for this session. And gentlemen and ladies, please, you may return to your seats. Okay, it's a networking session on the stage. That's also fine. Thank you very much. It was a very insightful session. And now let's go ahead with a focus discussion 1.